You are being scanned right now. Every time you enter a room, before you even open your mouse, the people around you have already calculated your utility. They've registered the drape of your coat, the brand of your watch, the frequency of your confidence. They aren't looking at you, they're placing you on a map you didn't even know you were standing on. This is a silent audit of status. And here's the part most people miss. You are doing it too. You are the auditor and the audited, the observer and the observed. 18 years in New York taught me this. Status isn't theory. It's atmosphere. Something in the air before a word is spoken. In a city built on performance, no one is actually watching the sunset. They're watching who else is watching it and who they are standing next to. It's an invisible scoreboard. Who gets a table, who gets the investment, who disappears into the noise. It is the unspoken architecture of human hierarchy. But if you stay long enough, you start to see the cracks. The ladder everyone is climbing isn't leaning against a wall. It's leaning against a ghost. A game with no finish line. So the question isn't how to win, the question is who decided the game was worth playing? And why are you spending your life trying to buy a higher score? Before status became culture, it was biology. Long before brands, couriers, or social media, human beings were already ranking each other. Who is stronger? Who is more capable? Who has access to resources? Who attracts attention? Status was never just about recognition. It was about survival. Higher status meant more protection, more access, more opportunity, and crucially, more attention. And attention has always been valuable. Evolutionary psychologists like Dr. David Buss have shown that attraction, competition, and behavior are deeply shaped by these hierarchies. You don't simply like status. You're wired to respond to it. Approval feels good. Rejection feels painful. Not metaphorically, chemically. Because status is tied to reward. Attention signals relevance. Relevance signals value. Value signals opportunity. And historically, opportunity meant survival. That logic never disappeared. It scaled. What used to determine survival now determines identity. That's where culture takes over. Something unusual starts to happen. People stop consuming based on need. They start consuming based on visibility. Objects became signals, not tools, not utilities, signals. A watch is not about time. A car is not about transportation. A Bugatti is not a car. It's a statement with wheels. It communicates position, distance. And once others recognize that signal, it becomes real. But objects are only the surface, because status does not live in things. It lives in perception. Status is also embedded in something less visible: taste, language, references. What you understand, what you value, what you ignore. Two people can stand next to each other with similar resources and exist in completely different positions. Because status is not material, it is interpretive. And once something depends on interpretation, it can be shaped. That is a turning point. This is where the mirror begins to eat the person. We stop being the masters of our own preferences and become the puppets of our own perception. Because when status becomes something that can be performed, the mechanism accelerates. It's been described before. René Girard called it something specific. Human beings do not generate desire independently. they copy it. You see someone recognized, and the recognition becomes valuable. You see someone elevated, and elevation becomes the goal. You don't want the object, you want the position. And once enough people begin to orient themselves toward the same signals, a pattern forms. Not coordination, alignment. Different people, different lives, different intentions, arriving at the same definitions of success. That alignment used to be limited. It was shaped by proximity, by environment, by social circles. Today, those limits are gone. The reference point is global, and more importantly, it is curated. You're not seeing reality. You are seeing what performs, what holds attention, what creates reaction, what generates engagement. And that becomes your standard. Over time, something subtle happens. Status becomes standardized. The same aesthetics, the same lifestyles, the same signals. Not because people agree, but because they are exposed to the same models. And once repetition stabilizes perception, it becomes indistinguishable from reality. This is where the shift becomes irreversible. Status detaches from reality. You no longer need to become something to be seen as it. You only need to simulate it convincingly. Images can be constructed. Narratives can be designed. Identities can be assembled. And in a world built on visibility, appearance is enough. Because if something is consistently seen, it becomes a reference. And once it becomes a reference, others align to it. Status used to follow achievement. Now it can come before it. And once it comes before it, it can generate it. Opportunities follow perception. Attention follows visibility, which means being seen as high status can create real-world advantage, even without substance. This is where instability begins, not material instability, perceptual instability. You can be relevant today and invisible tomorrow. Not because you changed, but because attention moved, which leads to pressure, more output, more presence, more signaling. Not to grow, but to maintain position. And at the same time, more people enter the game. More visibility, same signals, less space. More competition for the same recognition. And this is where tension builds, not because people are different, but because they want the same position. Status is not separate from conflict. It produces it. Because recognition is limited, and once too many people chase the same signal, distinction collapses. At that point, the system intensifies. More performance, more exaggeration, more extremes. Because quiet signals no longer work, and underneath all of this, the mechanisms remain simple. Status only works because people agree it works. A king is not powerful because he's a king. He is powerful because enough people decide to kneel. And once they kneel, the power becomes real. This is where the question starts to shift. Because if status is constructed, if it is performed, if it is reinforced, what exactly are you chasing? And here's the part most people don't see. This isn't just human nature. It's also design, because a structure built on comparison is incredibly profitable. If people are constantly measuring themselves, they keep upgrading, they keep consuming, they keep performing. Status is not only psychological, it's economic. Entire industries depend on it. Luxury, fashion, social media, personal branding, even education. You're not just participating in the game, you are being kept inside it. Not in some hidden way, in a structural way. Because a person who is content is much harder to monetize, but a person who feels slightly behind will always move, upgrade, improve, optimize, perform. And that movement fools everything. Which is why the game never ends. Not because you're failing, but because the structure is designed to remove the finish line. And this is where the question becomes real. Not how do I win the status game, but do I even know what I want outside of it? Because that's the one question almost nobody is trained to ask. You spend 10, 12, sometimes 13 years in school learning how to perform, but never how to choose what to want, what to value, what to ignore. So you enter the world already calibrated to a structure you didn't design. And from that point on, you call it ambition. And that is where everything connects: desire, status, competition. Not as separate forces, but as one continuous loop. And once you see that loop, you can't fully unsee it. You still participate. But something changes. The signals become visible. The patterns become clear. The pressure becomes optional. Because in the end, the future will not belong to those who chase status most aggressively. It will belong to those who understand how it is created, how it is amplified, how it is sustained. And most importantly, when to step outside of it. Because the final shift is not about status. It's about awareness, the ability to recognize what you're responding to, what you're imitating, what you never choose. Stop looking at the mirror, look at the glass. The glitch wants you to believe the next rung will finally give you a view. It won't. The view only appears when you stop climbing. Ask yourself, at least once, before the next scan begins, is this actually what I want, or just what I learned to want? This is part of the TOMAAS prophecies, cinematic essays that read between the fractures of modern life through image, pattern, and perception. Because by the time everyone understands the shift, it already happened. A different way of seeing. Art isn't decoration, it's intel. If something here stayed with you, don't just scroll, leave the thought it triggered. And if you're curious about the visual work behind it, you can explore more of my artworks at TOMAAS.com.